to go higher on seed oils and to avoid animal fats. And that's what I did. I sort of promoted that idea to my mother as well, unfortunately, and sort of lessened her life.
Oh, so welcome to another video. It's a success story with a slight difference because this is an influencer who really influenced me. So I'm really going to dig in and find out exactly why Harry went carnivore. That's basically what we're going to look at. And hi, Harry.
G'day, Stefan. How are you, mate?
I'm fine. What I love about people all around the world is they pronounce Stephen as Stefan, and I think it's really cool. So, and in Italy, I have people Stefano, which is great. So, people that know Harry will know he's very science based and really into no BS at all, which is right up my street. But I'm actually going to ask Harry a few questions about his past and any sort of illnesses he had and why he ended up carnivore. So there you go, Harry. Your first question is, what made you consider carnivore?
Before I do that, I'll just say, Stefan, or
Stephen.
using that. But I know it's you. I'll call you Stephen because you prefer that. It's just out of habit, because also in Greek, because I am Greek, ancestry.
Yes.
Stephanos.
Yeah.
So it's sort of stuck. It sticks in my mind. But yeah, getting back to your question. Look, I sort of 12 years ago, I had cardiovascular disease, and like I was for many years on a sad diet for 25 years plus, more or less. Prior to that, as a youngster, my parents, I did consume a sort of a mixed diet, but it was less processed at the time. As a teenager, I lived in Greece for about 6 odd years in my high school there, and I had a diet which was more animal based. I was ripped, lean as a youngster, and really strong physically. And when I returned back to Australia in my late, I was about 8, I was already heading on to 19 years of age. I was just a typical youngster, enjoying life. And then by my mid-20s, this was a time when it was the early 90s. The low-fat sort of craze was really high. And to a large extent, I was sort of influenced by the culture at the time, like a lot of us were, to go low fat, to go higher on seed oils and to avoid animal fats. And that's what I did. I sort of promoted that idea to my mother as well, unfortunately, and sort of lessened her life because she respected my opinion quite a bit because I was a child that was profusely read, very good in science and philosophy and many things. I had weeks where I would go through like 7 books in a week. And as a consequence, mum took that to heart. Nutrition didn't really interest me at that young age because I was more interested in archaeology, in science, in primarily physics. Doris was my teacher in Greece. He was a physicist. I was a very close friend of my physicist teacher. It's my best subject. I actually got my best marks in physics and chemistry, and it's where most of my interest was in sort of STEM subjects. I really struggled with with literature. I didn't do too bad. I was getting 14 or 15 out of 20, so I was getting about nearly a credit most of the time. It was only an ancient Greek that I knew the swear words, but beyond that, I did pretty poorly. I was getting 12. I got first year of high, I got 12 out of 20, then 11 out of 20, then 12 again out of 20. So I, was doing a pass, slightly above a pass, but it wasn't. Literature was never my forte. I didn't like. I have to say, I do enjoy a bit of some non-fiction stuff, but I'm sorry, fiction stuff when it comes to like sci-fi type stuff. But I don't. It's not my forte. For me, it's like non-fiction is always been my interest. You know, really hard facts and stuff like that has been my focus of my life from a very young age. I just want to know how things work, how the universe works, and stuff like that. So, I mean, I got into physics. You know, possibly John Wheeler from Texas University. He was probably one of my favorite physicists back then as a youngster. I think he's dead now, but anyway, he was one of my favorite physicists. And there was a few other people. I have jettisoned a lot of those beliefs nowadays with the multiverse and
telescope, the new telescope, that seems to be
that's unraveling a lot of things, which is really interesting. So I do keep an eye on all that sort of stuff. What I've come to realize in my older, more cynical years is that science isn't as pure as I thought it was in the beginning as a youngster.
Absolutely. Yes.
And it's been a big revelation for me when it comes to nutritional science. It's just, you know,
an oxymoron almost.
It's nonsense.
Yes.
A lot of it, 99% of it is just junk, which is a big disappointment in that regard. And when it comes to even other areas of science, I've realized there's been two pathways in science that started in the early part of the 20th century. And one is, this rationalist thinking. And then there's the other one, the empiricist thinking, which was traditional science for millennia. That was, if it's experimental, it can actually be demonstrated and proven. That is replicatable truth. The rest of it is sort of extrapolation through modeling, through mathematics. And we know that underlying mathematics, even the mathematicians themselves know that the basis of mathematics is very much the foundations of mathematics are, without a basis. There is really poor, without getting it, this is the purpose of this conversation, but it's just to realize where I've come from and how I've come to the realization that, my field I'm in spatial science, which is sort of cartography, but it's gone beyond that. It's sort of nowadays we use AIs and all sorts of technology to analyze data, so a geographic data, so to speak, or terrestrial data. But it gives you a different mindset, a more analytical mindset, which a lot of the other sciences, physics, some of the hardcore areas seem to have jettisoned to a large extent. And we're poorer for it, unfortunately. Now, getting back to the question, how I got to the carnivore diet is it was a long trip for the last 12 years. And I've been now nearly 4 years carnivore, but for the 8 years, I sort of, the first year I felt sorry for myself with cardiovascular disease. Then by the end of the year, I realized statins were dangerous, so I gave up on them. I was on aspirin and statins coming out of bypass surgery. And then
You actually had a bypass. Sorry, Harry.
Double bypass at the age of 44.
Right.
So I felt shortness of breath and all that. I wasn't feeling great. I had this massive reduction in energy and I didn't know what was happening. So I actually, because I was a smoker in the past, I suspected that it was basically, I thought that it was cancer. But I walked into the hospital and actually said, look, I'm not feeling well. There's something wrong with me. At that time, I had a big pot belly. I was carrying about nearly 20 kilos more. So that's, probably 40 pounds plus 44 pounds. So, I was a, heavy dude. And I had this sort of very pale white, not in eating enough animal foods, obviously, and I was in really a bad state. And pretty much my cardiologist at the time, who was allocated to me, said, no, it's not cancer. We're getting irregular arrhythmia with your heart, and we suspect you may have some sort of cardiovascular disease. They were waiting on some blood tests. It came back positive that I had some sort of angina incident. So luckily it didn't kill me. So,
yeah.
And then they said, you've got an opportunity tomorrow to have surgery. You've got severe blockage, because they actually did some tests and stuff like that. So, and
anyway, yes.
yeah. And pretty much I did statins, and I was still on a sad diet and aspirin for a year. And then I realized I can't live like this.
Yeah.
I have to find a solution. And I started investigating the research. I can say that in the first 3 months, all I came across was garbage upon garbage upon garbage. And I'm going, this can't be right. This idiopathic, they don't have any idea what is causing this, is just nonsense. These people are claiming that LDL causes, they're claiming this, that, and that, and then they're claiming idiopathic. You can't have it both ways, guys. You can't claim that these things are causal. You can't prove it, and then you say it's all idiopathic. We don't know why. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yes.
I mean, it's a contradiction in terms. And I realized that these people had no freaking idea what they were talking about. So
Absolutely.
I did a deep dive. And as I did a deep dive, I looked into, and I came across some studies, some research from 83 and 84, which looked at lipid peroxidation. And I go, okay, what's causing this? And I realized it was seed oils.
Yep.
And I go, well, that's bloody interesting. And I go, and the researchers, this is the funny thing, in the second study, I think it was the 84 study. The researchers said, because they believed they couldn't change the food environment, their recommendations was to lower the level of circulating LDL in order to reduce the degree of lipid peroxidation, to reduce the assault on the endothelium, on the actual blood vessels. And I'm going, well, that's a bit of a cop-out. You guys don't have the courage of your convictions. You've actually found what is causing this problem. You've actually shown a mechanistic relationship, and you're too gutless to basically, state it, the truth. The only stuff that actually, it took me a very long time to realize a lot of this research, that what you put in your body really affects your energy output.
Yep.
And over time, you do more and more damage to the electron chains in your body, and you reduce your energy. And I was, a person that consumed very high amount of seed oils. So the 130 is the threshold. I was consuming seed oils, which can be as high as 255 parts per million. So we're talking about double the amount, approximately. So it is beyond the physiological capacity of, your mitochondria to cope with that level of deuterium. It's this sort of research that I looked at, and a lot of other research, that eventually got me to the understanding of why I got sick.
Yes.
Why I end up with cardiovascular disease. It was these refined oils that did a lot of the damage. I wasn't a big, because I used to consume a lot of savory foods. I never liked sugar. Even in my coffee, I've never put sugar. I used to use milk, but I just basically was never really a sugar addict. For me, it was really the high deuterium, and the high oxidative byproducts and aldehydes coming from seed oils. I embraced them with a vengeance as a youngster.
Yes.
I cooked everything in them. And so I did a lot of mitochondrial damage to myself. And I'm still on the recovery. I'm much better than I look better at 56 than what I used to look. Most people that if they look at old photos, and some actually, I actually had some people that that know me that looked at my old photos on my Facebook page and said, "God, you look different." He said, because I was much more overweight and I was much more unhealthy in a lot of respects. And you could actually see I was pasty. My face was pasty. I was a very different person back then. But I was metabolically really deranged in a number of ways. I just didn't know it. I have no idea. Like most people out there, we've been told certain things. We also always believed in the experts. And I came from, being in the STEM fields myself. I just believed that everybody else in those sort of fields was the same. They sort of really were very sciencey, really were interested in the truth. But when I started looking at nutrition and pharmacology and stuff like that, I realized that these people were just doing it for the money. They were being paid. I was just shocked at the level of corruption and how the institutions have been corrupted, especially from the 80s onwards. It's been horrendous, the levels. There was earlier, but it really got ramped up in the 80s and all that. And that's when a lot of government money actually reduced in terms of funding and more private money came into academia, and it really corrupted the whole field, where some of the best science that I find nowadays are actually in, developing countries and other parts of the world where they do still basic research, and they're more interested in finding solutions for their populations. I mean, like pernicious anemia amongst the Palestinians, and they find, well, we can use taurine to basically ameliorate that problem of anemia amongst the Palestinian girls in the Gaza Strip. So, I mean, and when you look at that, that's, well, look, selling something that comes from animal foods is not going to make Big Pharma a lot of money. So
I mean, that was one of the things I was going to I didn't want to interrupt you in your flow there, Harry. So people that haven't seen you, this is why Harry's live streams last ever such a long time.
Hours.
It gets into the nitty gritty. I'd just like to add a couple of things, because we might end up releasing a short version and a longer version for people that really want the science. I followed you completely when we were talking about electron transport chain and seed oils, but just to dumb it down for people, because I underestimated the damage of seed oils. And I'll be honest with you, you've hit on something I don't talk about very much. I did the healthy diet. And I had a coronary artery calcium scan, which was 639, but I had been low fat. And I had been eating, grains and drinking freshly squeezed orange juice and all that sort of stuff. But a big part was the seed oils. I would get my frying pan and I would squirt my sunflower oil into it and think, wow, look at this, no fat whatsoever. And it took me probably a year of carnivore after, 5 years low carb and keto to realize, hey, I'm underestimating how bad seed oils are. I've heard, and you'll be able to back this up, I think, that seed oils take maybe 8 years to get completely out of your system.
Pretty much, because you've got a whole lot of your cell turnover. So, and at the same time, I usually recommend a low dose vitamin E. And the reason for that is to stabilize PUFA that's being released from your fat cells. So we won't use the adipose word, and pretty much as your fat cells release this sort of stuff. I actually did a recent video a couple of months ago, and it was actually is your, this was with the cancer people, is your, losing weight, is that damaging your mitochondria? And I actually do believe that. I realized that my fat loss and stuff like that, was retarded severely. And I noticed that I was actually losing energy. This was a couple of years back. And I realized, I'd actually rapidly lost weight in 6 months doing keto. And then all of a sudden I plateaued out severely. I couldn't actually budge at all. And my energy levels dropped, and I just could not understand it. This was a number of years back before I even became carnivore. I went low carb for a while and sort of trying to investigate what the hell's happening. I just couldn't understand it. And I've came to the conclusion that we've got stored PUFA. Now, I've always said this, we're not ancestral. I am not like my ancestors. Somebody that actually seasonally stores, by engaging the Randall cycle, seasonally stores fat for a rainy day later on, that fat is low deuterium fat. It's not the same. What I've been storing in my fat cells, like most of the population, is high deuterium fat. That's the problem. So when you actually lose weight, you hit a plateau. It's because you've actually damaged your mitochondria, especially when you rapidly lose weight. Yes.
So I'm going to have to stop for a second because I'm on the cheap version of Zoom. And I'm
Okay.
have to set up another. You good to keep going, Harry?
I'm good to go. Not a problem.
Oh, I'll set up another meeting because it's going to be rude to sort of cut you off in 2 minutes, and we'll pick up on that on the weight loss stall, I think, if that's all right.
Not a problem.
I'm going